For more on these escalating war of words between President Trump and North Korea, Bill Daly is joining us now from Chicago. He's the head of the U.S. operations for Swiss hedge fund Argentiere Capital, but he's also a long and storied career in Washington, served as the White House Chief of Staff to President Barack Obama, and also was Commerce Secretary under President Bill Clinton. Bill, great to see you here tonight.
Thanks, Betty. Thanks very much for having me.
Okay, so you just heard these comments from President Trump saying that North Korea will see things that they never thought possible. What do you read into that?
Well, obviously, the president thinks that sending that sort of message is somehow going to back down Kim Jong-un. I don't think there's anyone in the world who doesn't realize, who's rational, the power of the United States military. It is unparalleled. It is, without question, the most formidable military. So I don't think it's going to surprise anybody that we have capacity beyond anyone else.
Right.
But it does cause one to hesitate, because it's not normal for a president to draw a line, basically. Obviously, if the North Koreans attack Guam or fired any missile towards Guam over Japan,
right, that
would be a whole different situation.
But
it's different. But this president's very different than most previous ones.
I would sure say very different, Bill. I mean, do you condone this kind of strategy, though?
Well, look at the bottom line, obviously, is what works.
But do you think it works?
It is very different.
Do you think it will work?
I don't believe it works with Kim Jong-un. It maybe would work with another leader, but it surely doesn't work. And this sort of rhetoric, as we've seen historically, you end up just ratcheting it up. It very seldom ever ratchets down, and you have a mixed signal from Secretary Tillerson, who's talking even the other day about face-to-face negotiations with the North Koreans, obviously with conditions, and then the president goes out and raises the level, not lowers the level of rhetoric.
Bill, you know, this, of course, the other player in all of this is China, a very important player, and I want to just play for you and our viewers a comment that Trump made about how, you know, he's basically using North Korea as a leverage in the trade relations with China. Let's just play that, guys.
We lose hundreds of billions of dollars a year on trade with China. They know how I feel. It's not going to continue like that. But if China helps us, I feel a lot differently toward trade. A lot differently toward trade.
Do you think that's going to work, Bill?
Well, you know, the Chinese don't take too kindly to being basically threatened. Everyone knows that the president ran on a very tough trade change with China. That's a given. But to put solving the North Korean problem totally in the Chinese lap and say, if you don't solve this, then we will take enormous actions against you in trade, I don't know if that's a real strategy that can actually work, to be frank with you, because the Chinese are not going to be threatened into doing something. Obviously, they did vote at the UN for sanctions. Now, they have to enforce those sanctions. No one else really is in a position to enforce those. But those sanctions will take a very long time to really begin to hurt in North Korea. And whether or not the North Koreans, who have proven they can take a lot of pain with a bad economy, will respond somehow because of the economic issues, I'm not quite sure that I think it's a little more nuanced than what the president is saying.
Bill, it's Yvonne in Hong Kong. Is it time for a radical approach then? We spoke with Jay Lefkowitz, the former U.S. Special Envoy for Human Rights to North Korea, and he said it might be time for the U.S. to actually drop the One Korea policy and abandon it altogether. He says that's the only meaningful concession that the U.S. can make to get China actually on board, because the fear of the unified Korea is actually greater than, you know, destabilizing Pyongyang. To what extent do you think that the One Korea policy is no longer realistic or viable?
Well, it doesn't look like it's viable, very viable right now. The truth of the matter is, it's not as though we've pressed that One Korea policy. We have not done anything of great note over the last 60 years, almost 70 years, to re-engage North and South, other than at times the South has wanted on their own to take steps to try to lessen the tension. And 20-some years ago, there was some real effort being made before this new leader in North Korea to try to reestablish family, at least, relationships between the North and South. But I think that's probably an idea that should be put on the table. But remember, the line that the president has drawn and every other administration is they're having the capacity with nuclear weapons to strike our shores. That is a red line that every president has said that cannot be crossed, and it looks like the North Koreans are very, very close, if not there, having that capacity. So it's a situation that is probably the most serious, that no question about it, that we've had, the U.S. With another country since the Cuban Missile Crisis back in the early 60s.
Bill, give us a little bit color and contrast on the Obama administration that you served and the Trump administration that you see now. How does John Kelly tame an unpredictable President Trump?
Well, I don't think he could tame the president. I mean, it's been obvious that the expectation that somehow General Kelly would control the tweets hasn't quite happened, nor the comments of the president, the ones we were talking about on the rhetoric regarding North Korea. But I think what he has brought is a stability and a control in the White House with the White House staff. I think there's less leaking, less pointing the fingers at each other, less of that infighting that seemed to be so prevalent for the first 7 months. So I think from that perspective, he is extremely good. And having him there during this crisis with North Korea is a tremendous advantage for the president, because obviously the general knows these subjects. He has strong relationships with the people who would have to prosecute some sort of military action and the options and the process of which the military goes about that. So his being there at this critical time is invaluable to President Trump. But the thought that he or anyone else is going to change the president after 70 years of the style he's had and the success he's had at it, obviously attaining the presidency when nobody thought he had a chance 2 years ago.
Why do you think the president is surrounding himself with military men and generals? To a certain extent, is it because they take orders?
Well, I think that's part of it. I think they are also, as opposed to, quite frankly, many political people, very disciplined, very follow the process, but it's so contrary to the president's style. Now, it's understandable why your national security advisor would be a military person. The Secretary of Defense, Donald Trump, has had no experience with these subjects in his entire life. And he even admitted during the campaign that he got his news about the military from generals on television. Right. So at least there he's acknowledging a shortcoming that he's got and trying to make up for it.
Bill, you were in a podcast recently with David Axelrod, the senior advisor to the president, to President Obama, and you said that you didn't think that Trump was going to run in 2020. Why?
I think the president will not run, because I think he will probably see that there's a good possibility he won't win. He, in my mind, to use gambling terms, basically pulled an inside straight in the last election and pulled off an election that was quite surprising. Even though he lost by almost 3 million popular votes, he still won the Electoral College. To do that twice is analogous in gambling to pulling an inside straight, and I don't think he's going to do that. And I don't think he will risk the thought of losing and therefore going out on a high that he would be able to if he doesn't run again.
Well, Bill, something not helping that situation, though, I would say, is trying to repeal Obamacare, right? And we saw earlier today President Trump tweeting out, lambasting Mitch McConnell for not getting it done. I want to just read you that tweet really quickly. Can you believe that Mitch McConnell, who has screamed repeal and replace for 7 years, couldn't get it done, must repeal and replace Obamacare? And of course, his always exclamation mark at the end of it. Bill, do you think it's completely dead?
Well, I think the irony of this is the president has talked, President Trump has talked about this, but he never put a plan out to repeal and then replace. Right. So he's calling on the Congress.
Well, he recognized it was going to be harder to do that than he realized.
Well, he also realized that health care is complicated. Yeah. I mean, that's a big admission at this stage. But I think it just makes it very hard for him to get. He's got a debt ceiling. He's got a continuing resolution for a budget to keep the government going in September. Yeah. He may have more and tougher sanctions on North Korea. And then they're going to try to do a tax bill. I think the chance of a tax bill getting done this year is slim to none, especially with all these other immediate crises that are going on and challenges for the Congress.
Bill, really quickly before we go, you were Commerce Secretary. How do you think Wilbur Ross is doing right now?
I think he's doing fine. I think he's still, lacking lots of people in the agency to help him. But they put their mark down that the Commerce Department is going to be the prosecutor on trade and change trade, renegotiate NAFTA. No doubt about it. NAFTA is 24 years old. Yeah. Improving it, updating it is needed. But, you know, the president also challenged that if it didn't get improved the way he wants it, he will cancel it and do away with it. That's a rather bold statement that it could have an enormous impact on our economy, the Mexican economy, and the North American economy overall.
Bill, so great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Bill Daly, Argentiere Capital, head of U.S. operations, and, of course, the former White House chief of staff and former Commerce Secretary.